Fyodor Dostoevsky famously said that beauty will save the world. In his poem Ode on a Grecian Urn, John Keats wrote, "Beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know." And Pope Benedict XVI argued that the beauty the church has produced and the lives of the saints are the most convincing arguments for Christianity. That all sounds nice, but what does any of it actually mean? Is beauty really necessary, or is it just a luxury? And can we even speak of something like objective beauty, or is it merely in the eyes of the beholder? These are some of the questions I want to look at today as we think about the role of beauty, especially in the life of the church. And hey, if you enjoy videos like this, consider supporting the channel by going to patreon.com/gospelsimplicity. By becoming a patron, you'll get early, ad-free access to all my interviews, as well as a host of other fun perks, like access to my book club, where we dive into beautiful works of the church fathers together. To those of you who support this channel, none of this would be possible without you, so thank you. One of the places where the question of beauty comes up today is whether or not we need beautiful churches. For those really plugged into the Christian YouTube scene, you'll be aware that this has been a point of contention in debates over Redeemed Zoomer's Operation Reconquista, which seeks to restore mainline churches to orthodox teaching, and part of the value seen in these churches is their beautiful buildings. It's no secret that, in general, church architecture isn't exactly what it used to be. Despite all our technological advancements and our general prosperity, especially in the West, it's rare to find churches today that people will be visiting hundreds of years from now. For instance, I grew up in a church that was the biggest in our town and had significant resources at its disposal. Yet it looked like this. Not exactly inspiring from the outside. By contrast, this church, which I've toured on this channel, was built by poor Polish immigrants with nowhere near the resources, neither technologically or financially, at their disposal. Even as the West has gotten progressively less religious, people have continued to be drawn toward beautiful churches. Most people would consider a trip to Europe incomplete without visiting the stunning churches there. If you look at the list of the most beautiful buildings in nearly any historically Christian city, churches will feature prominently on the list. But what is it that makes these churches beautiful? And does it really matter if your church is beautiful? For that, we'll need to ask what beauty is in the first place. Most people think of beauty as an aesthetic category. In other words, beauty is about things looking nice. While that can be a part of beauty, it does seem incomplete. We don't only call buildings and bodies beautiful, but we also say that the act of giving to the poor or sacrificing oneself for others is beautiful. So how do those things relate? For that, we'll turn to one of my favorite philosophers, the Russian existentialist Nikolai Berdyaev. By the way, if you want to go deeper into his thoughts on beauty, I wrote an essay about that on my Substack, which I'll link down below. So Berdyaev offers us the following. Beauty is a characteristic of the highest qualitative state of being, of the highest attainment of existence. It is not a separate side of existence. It may be said that beauty is not only an aesthetic category, but a metaphysical category also. If anything is perceived and accepted by man integrally as a whole, that is precisely beauty. By arguing that beauty is metaphysical as well as aesthetic, Berdyaev is saying that beauty is as much about something's essence as it is about its appearance. In other words, when people say that someone has inner beauty, they're touching on something important. It would seem, though, that there are two extremes then to avoid when talking about beauty. On the one hand, we could say that beauty is only about the inside of a person, place, or thing. That would be to value the metaphysical apart from the aesthetic. On the other hand, we could say that beauty is only about the appearance of a person, place, or thing. That would be like saying a movie that cinematically portrays the exploitation of workers is beautiful. Both of these, though, would be missing something because beauty holds together the aesthetic and the metaphysical. That's why Berdyaev rejects mere prettiness. He writes, "Prettiness is fraudulent beauty. It relates to the phenomenal only. In beauty, on the other hand, there is a noumenal principle." This idea that beauty touches on the noumenal or metaphysical doesn't only tell us that it's more than appearances, though. It leads us to an incredibly important point that has really been a hallmark in discussions about beauty for centuries. That is the idea that beauty is a transcendental. Now, if you didn't grow up on classical philosophy, which is a shame but wasn't your fault, that might be a new word for you. Basically, the idea of a transcendental is that it points beyond the physical world, thus transcends in transcendental. For most of history, transcendentals have been critical to arguments about the existence of God. And it's easy to see why that would be. If there are things that point beyond the material world, it leads us to think about the immaterial or the transcendent. If these things that point to the beyond are ordered and sensible, we might begin to think about an ordered and sensible source for them, a source like a personal God. Now, traditionally, there are three transcendentals, at least in the Christian conception. They are beauty, truth, and goodness. In the Christian tradition, all of these point to God and ultimately flow from God as well. More than that, God is the ultimate referent of these. Now, that might all sound a bit technical, but what these ideas get at is that beauty, truth, and goodness are essentially reflections of God's nature. And since they all find their true nature in God, they all converge. Thus, we have our first clue about what Keats' poem could mean. That beauty is truth and truth beauty shows us that these ideas are intimately connected and ultimately converge in God. But that's a huge realization. If beauty and truth converge, then beauty is a way of finding truth, and vice versa. And that's exactly what Pope Benedict XVI was getting at as well. Beauty is our apologetic, not because people will see pretty stuff and decide to be Christian just on impulse. Likewise, it's not beauty dupes us into irrational thinking. It's actually the opposite. That which is beautiful, and I mean truly beautiful, is inextricably linked with what is true. But how do we know what's beautiful? That might seem like an odd question. Recognizing beauty is something that's instinctual. We don't need to convince ourselves something is beautiful. We just instinctively feel it. Sure, someone might tell you to stare at a piece of postmodern artistic nonsense like a banana taped to a wall and convince yourself it's beautiful. But I think most of us sense that there's something deeply wrong with that. Still, though, it is the case that not everyone finds the same things beautiful. Though it must be said that there's more convergence here than we might think. There's a reason people flock to see the Sagrada Familia and not corporate office buildings. Nevertheless, if we walk through an art gallery together, which I'd love to do with you, you might be moved by a piece that does nothing to me, and vice versa. That there's any divergence brings us to the age-old question of whether beauty is objective or subjective. And to me, the only proper answer seems to be yes. Recall that beauty is both about the essence and appearance. In a similar way, beauty is both something present in an object and something that must be perceived by man. In other words, beauty is an interaction, a meeting of subject and object. Furthermore, beauty as a transcendental is a quality that's present in finite, tangible things that simultaneously always points to something bigger and beyond. It is the finite grasping at infinity, or in theological terms, it is creation becoming transfigured by God. Beauty is divinization happening before our eyes. But how will beauty save the world? I mean, it's one thing to talk about the nature of beauty, but what does it have to do with our real world? Even in connecting it to truth, that doesn't always give us a straight line towards something that is practical. And that, to me, has been at the heart of so much abandonment of beauty in the church today. Especially in the evangelical world, there is an intense focus on pragmatism. The church is tasked with the serious business of saving souls, and beauty seems like a pretty roundabout, inefficient way of doing that. As we've already seen, the first mistake I think this makes is that it divorces beauty from truth. However, if we're going to have a classical Christian view on this, we must see that beauty cannot be separated from truth. That still doesn't get us to goodness, though, our final transcendental. Sure, we might say that the truth will set us free, but true as that is, it still feels like we need more than that to say that beauty will save the world. For that, I think we should turn to another incredible writer on beauty, Elaine Scarry, whose book On Beauty and Being Just was one of the most impactful books I read during my undergraduate, and it's certainly the book I most regret lending to someone, seeing as I never got it back. If you're watching this, you know who you are. Scarry's basic thesis is that beauty, by focusing our attention on something outside of us, helps form us into more just people. How does that work, though? I mean, that's quite the claim. There are essentially three ways. First, beauty as an interaction between subject and object alerts us to the value of things around us in such a way that we make a sort of pact with them. It's this pact between subject and beautiful object that explains why we feel injustice in beautiful things being destroyed, or why people sobbed when Notre Dame burned. The second idea is that symmetry, one of the hallmarks of beauty, has a natural corollary with fairness. When we notice asymmetry in relationships or a lack of harmony in the world, we're alerted to the fact that something is wrong, and as lovers of beauty, we should want to put it right. The third idea, and probably my favorite of them, is this concept of decentering. Basically, most of us live as though we're at the center of the universe, and this is the root of so much pain and suffering in the world. We act in ways that are beneficial to us at the expense of others. We are, as Martin Luther put it, humans curved in on ourselves. Beauty then turns us back out. If we can live as people who do not see ourselves as the center of the universe, but others, then we're well on the way to saving the world. And here's the thing, this isn't just like empty moralism. For the properly attuned mind, or in the words of Berdyaev, the one who perceives integrally and wholly, then when someone sees beauty in others, it is not a beauty that dead ends in them, or the beauty of the building or the waterfall. Beauty is always actually pointing to the transcendent. It points out to God. Learning to see beauty then doesn't just de-center us, but it ultimately centers God. So, what does this all have to do with churches? My basic thesis would be that to say beauty doesn't matter in churches would be akin to saying that truth and goodness do not matter in churches either. To deny the importance of beauty is to rupture the Christian conception of the transcendentals, and we do that only to our detriment. We should remember, though, beauty is neither mere prettiness nor sentimentality. We need both. At the level of buildings, classical church architecture, be it Gothic, Baroque, or Byzantine, all endeavored to create structures that had all the hallmarks of aesthetic beauty, while coupling this with a deeper metaphysical sense that these aspects of symmetry, scale, and directionality would point one to a deeper truth about God. And maybe you've experienced this in a beautiful church where all of a sudden you felt small, or you felt drawn up to look at God, or you felt like you were caught up in the worship of the saints, and it was through the architecture that you got quiet, that you had a sense of the sacred. That is that meeting of metaphysical truth and aesthetic principles. A church, though, is not just a building. We could say that a church has a truly beautiful building, but at a deeper level, the church was merely pretty if it lacked metaphysical beauty at the level of the life that animates the church, which extends far beyond the structure. In other words, we absolutely should value creating, maintaining, and restoring beautiful church buildings. We also need to value beautiful church communities that reflect the very glory of God. This is not just for aesthetic enjoyment, but it's because beauty will save the world. Beauty is truth, and beauty is our apologetic to a world that is drowning in the ugliness of sin.